If you're looking to make solar simple, give Ron Domenico with AD Energy a call. All-day energy made simple. Solar solutions with zero down, options to lease or finance, and roofs and trees are no issue. Call Ron Domenico at 609-226-2802 and tell him you saw him on the Sports Box.
Well, hello again, and welcome to the show that you just can't get enough of. This is the Sports Box, where the only opinion that matters is right here. I am Mike Galetta, a.k.a. Hamilton Mike. Brian, the Ranger Retard, is on assignment. Today, we're going to give you a little bit of the NFL draft preview. We've been doing it all week. And today, we have the honor of bringing on a guy that we can talk a little draft with and see what his opinion is. He played 9 years in the NFL, including 6 years with the Buccaneers, 2 years with the Eagles, and 1 year with the Jets Broncos. He is the current host of the Ian Beckles Show on 102.5 The Bone in Tampa Bay, and it's on iHeartMedia on Sundays, 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Let's bring him on the show and talk a little draft. He is Ian Beckles, guard. Ian, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. How's the world treating you?
It's pretty good. I wish it was a little warmer up here than it would be in Tampa, but we're getting by up here.
Yeah, we're about ready to get over that 90 temperature real quick here, so we have all the heat.
Yeah, we're actually going to be 80s this week, so I'm pretty excited about that. Pretty pumped. But in any sense, Ian, I'm pretty pumped about the draft. But first, we're gonna talk about you a little bit. Here you are, Ian Beckles, drafted in 1990 in round 5 by the Buccaneers, coming out of Indiana. How was that moment, Ian? Can you bring us back to that time? How were you, feeling? How was the mood back then? How was everything?
Well, it's weird because a lot of people kind of know where they're going to get drafted. A lot of the higher guys, but when you're a middle round draft pick, you don't know. I didn't know whether I was going to go in the second round or the 12th round. I really didn't, because the scouts don't give you much of an indication. So
right.
We sat around and watched the draft, and I remember they did the first maybe 2 rounds on television way back when, and that was it. So after I left television, I went fishing for a little while, and I came back, and somebody told me that somebody from the Buccaneers had called, and I thought they were joking at first, and then I called up, and it was Ray Perkins, and I found out that they drafted me in the 5th round, and he said, we have a captain coming up in a couple of days, and then the rest is history.
Now, you transferred into Indiana, and you were a starter the 1 year, I believe, in '89. How did that come about after 1 year at Indiana, did you know you were going to the NFL draft, or was that kind of something that people kind of got you ready for, or how did that come about?
Yeah, I wasn't like a lot of other guys that had a lot of accolades all the way through. I went through junior college. I didn't start my first year in junior college, started my second year. I didn't start my junior year at Indiana, and I just started my senior year. Now, we blocked for a Heisman Trophy candidate, and I made all Big Ten and things like that were great, but I didn't have the accolades beforehand. So I really didn't know where I was going to go in the draft. And plus, being 6'1" as a guard, that's not exactly a positive. I had a lot of scouts tell me if I was 6'5", I'd be a high draft pick, but being 6'1", I think they're taking a little bit more of a chance. So I was just hoping I got drafted. If I got drafted in the 10th round, I would have been just as happy.
Yeah, any time you get drafted in the NFL, I'm sure is a big accomplishment. It's a dream come true for anybody, any boy growing up wanting to play in the NFL. Now, you actually blocked for Trent Green and Vaughn Dunbar, which is pretty amazing. You blocked for both of those guys, and they've gone to the NFL. Now, you came into the Buccaneers, and they were, let's no bones about it, they were a bad team at the time. You're talking about a team that had 157 losses in 14 years. This wasn't a good team. So the outlook for you, not only to go to the NFL, is, I'm guessing, I'm going to a bad team. This might be a hard road. Now, you said you were drafted by Ray Perkins. You also went through Richard Williamson and Sam Weish. How are those guys? Any differences between all the coaches?
Yeah, they're all polar opposites, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Ray Perkins was, he didn't mess around too much. He didn't smile much. He didn't talk much. He just kind of was to himself, and
right.
He wasn't a very likable person. That only lasted about 14 weeks or so. Then Richard Williamson took over, and Richard started off as a player's coach, and by the time we're halfway through that second season, we were losing about every game. He changed real quick to
Right.
And then Sam White came in, and he was kind of an odd magician type of guy. Like he tried to do things with smoke and mirrors, maybe a little bit too much.
Okay.
They're all different. Unfortunately, those three didn't work. But after that, I got a chance to play 1 year for Tony Dungy.
Yep.
And I got a chance to be exposed to, the way it's supposed to be. And he ultimately turned the whole thing around.
Yeah. In your 6 years or 7 years with the Buccaneers, after that in 97, I believe it was 1997. You came up here to Philadelphia to play with the Eagles for a couple years. How was that a kind of a messy partnership with the Buccaneers, or was that kind of a new slate for you?
Well, it wasn't really messy. Tony Dungy came in here. He wanted a certain type of athlete and player.
Mm-hmm.
I was getting on in age, and I couldn't do this young stuff a lot of these kids were doing, practicing every day. You get to a point in your career where you got to start taking care of some of these, the elder statesmen.
Right.
So it didn't really work out. I went to Philadelphia. I played for Ray Rhodes, who was definitely more veteran friendly, and he just basically said, as long as you play well on Sunday, I don't really care what happens during the week. And I wasn't able to really practice during the week, but Sunday came. I did what I had to do to play, and as long as you played well, it was all good. So it all worked out. I started there for 2 years, and then kind of bounced around a little bit after that, and that was it.
Yeah, it's funny. You came from a Buccaneers team where you played alongside Pro Bowler Paul Gruber, Tony Mayberry. You had running backs like Reggie Cobb and Eric Rett. And then you go to a Philadelphia Eagles team where you see the likes of Richard Cooper, Steve Everett, Bubba Miller, Jermaine Mayberry, and you obviously blocked for Ricky Waters. How could you explain the two teams? In other words, can you see Tampa Bay on the right path with Tony Dungy and then coming to the Eagles and seeing something different, or how was that transition for you?
Well, it was different. I mean, I was blessed to play with two good lines, in both teams.
Yeah.
Philadelphia, we were pretty darn huge offensive line.
Yep.
We had Ricky Waters and we had Charlie Garner as well.
Yep.
And we toted the pill as well as anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
I would have loved to have stayed here in Tampa Bay because, they just ran the football. Like they're not going to throw the ball 30 times a game. They ran the football, and that's what I did well. So it was a shame for me to leave, and it was a shame that when I left, they started to win as well. But when I got to Philadelphia, we had Charlie Garner, Ricky Waters, Irvin Fryer. We had a bunch of good football players, but there wasn't quite enough discipline, and that's what Tony Dungy instilled in all these guys here. They're a very disciplined team, and they always played hard as well. So I missed out on a lot of that.
Yeah, it might have been tough too in Tampa Bay because they didn't have a good patient level with getting better there. It was always kind of turnover the roster, and it seems like they were just going through people left and right. Tampa can never get it set until, like you said, the offensive line you guys had, that was pretty much the only thing that they were keeping intact. Everybody else was kind of shuffling around the mix.
Well, on offensive line, you say we were intact, and actually Tony Mayberry made a couple of Pro Bowls himself.
Okay.
It was myself and Tony and Paul for 7 straight years, but the other two positions were interchangeable.
Okay.
So some offensive lines get to play with each other for a long time. We had a bunch of different spots, or really 2 spots that were changing on a consistent basis. So we never got a chance to all be a cohesive offensive line for a long time, and that's when you play at your best. So actually, when I got to Philadelphia, we had a bunch of veteran players other than Trey, and we did well because we'd all been through it already, and we already knew the game. So it turned out well.
Yeah. So Ian, I basically want to give everybody a basic background of you, how NFL career. Hey, that's nothing to sneeze at. That's a great career you had down in Tampa, especially. Maybe I'm a little biased. I'm a Bucs fan, but anyway. We'll talk about the draft a little bit. You're on Sports Talk all the time. You hear a little bit more than I do about what's going on in Tampa with that pick. Bucs pick at 19. I've heard anywhere from they're going to be getting Dalvin Cook to they're going to be trading out of the first round. What are you hearing down there? What do you know about the Bucs at 19?
Well, this is what I'm going to say to everybody who pays a lot of attention to the draft. Okay, the draft's a funny time for me because I think there's a lot of experts that pop out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And they put on this expert label. And for me, to listen to somebody talk about a draft and do it correctly, then you would have had to sit down and watch film. and watch lots of film.
Yep.
Not just a little bit. You can't watch one film of somebody and think you know what kind of football player they are. That's impossible.
I agree.
Because we don't know who they're playing against. You have to watch at least a season. It'd be nice to watch 2 seasons. Okay, so it's a tough time for me because everybody after the draft always asks me, hey, how do you think the Bucs did in the draft? And look, I'm going to tell you right now, whoever the Bucs pick, if it's not Dalvin Cook, I probably didn't watch the guy play very much.
Okay.
I watched my share of college football, as you do probably as well, but I'm pretty sure whatever the 8 picks the Bucs make, I bet you watch very little of these players. So for somebody to come up the next day and say the Bucs had an A draft and the Bucs had a D draft, I think at times it's a little bit foolish. Right. So I'm very reserved on making predictions that way.
Right.
Because like I said, Dalvin Cook, I've seen him play, but I'm not going to bet my house that the guy's going to be a successful running back in the NFL because, you know what? There's very few of them anymore.
Sure. You just try to put as much information as you can and make your best guess. And I think a lot of guys should really go on the position the Bucs need. And that's and on that note, Ian, I'll talk about the Bucs positional needs. I mean, running back situation, I think everybody's looking to running back to what happened to Doug Martin last year. Who knows what's going to happen with Doug Martin this year with that whole incident that happened last year. They re-signed Jacquez Rodgers. There's a lot of things that could happen. I mean, do you see anything in the way of the Bucs positions that if they don't go running back, another position would be helpful for them to try to get to strengthen their team a little bit?
Now, it wouldn't shock me if they took Dalvin Cook, but if I'm a GM, I would never pick a running back in the first round. There's no way. I'd rather pick an offensive lineman and pick a running back in the 3rd and 4th round because look around the NFL. First of all, there's not too many guys that last very long.
No.
So it doesn't matter if you're 1st round or 4th round or 5th round.
Yeah.
So you look at a lot of these guys that are successful, they're later round picks. So I want to get me a good defensive lineman, a good offensive lineman. You know, I don't care what your running back looks like. If you can't rush the passer in the NFL, you can't win.
Yeah.
The quarterbacks are too good, and the offensive coordinators are too smart. So, running backs are great in certain situations. And other times, running backs are completely useless. If you're down 14 points in a football game, a running back's really not that useful anymore. So the game has changed, and it's not the same as it was back in the day where you give a running back 35 or 40 touches a game.
Right.
These guys get 20 touches a game, maybe tops, and there's 2 or 3 running backs in every backfield.
Sure. And I agree with that. I agree with that point. You look back at the NFL, there's not a lot of first-round running backs that really make it big. I mean, you look at actually Warwick Dunn for the Bucs. I don't think Warwick Dunn was taken in the 1st round. I think Warwick Dunn was taken in the 2nd or 3rd round.
And Warwick Dunn's an anomaly as well.
Yep.
You really can't compare people to Warwick Dunn. Nobody else did it like that.
Right. But it is a good thing that Dalvin Cook broke his records. I mean, that's enheartening for Dalvin Cook itself. I think they're just trying to maybe take a little bit of pressure off Winston, give him another weapon back there. But, I mean, I agree with you. I'm more of a defensive guy. I would look to bring another defensive end in or maybe even a linebacker. Well, actually, the Bucs are okay at linebacker. Speaking of the Buccaneers, what do you think about their secondary? I know their secondary struggled for the last couple of years now. Do you think they're pretty set at what they have now, or are they going to maybe in the draft probably pick up a cornerback or maybe even a safety in the later rounds 2 and 3 and 4?
Well, I was blessed to grow up when these guys were creating this Tampa too.
Yep.
And I've actually interviewed Tony Dungy before, and I said, Coach, let me ask you one question. What's more important in the Tampa 2, a pass rush or DBs? And he looked at me and took 1 second and said, a pass rush. If you have a pass rush, defensive backs are overrated because the same defensive backs that get burnt every week are the same ones that make big plays when we get a good pass rush. So the teams that have consistent pass rushes, their DBs look like champions. Back in the day, when the Buccaneers were great, you knew within 3 seconds or less that quarterback's getting hit by either Simeon Rice or Warren Sapp or even goal on the line. Yeah. But the quarterback's getting hit. So therefore, the DBs can jump on that first move, and the quarterback can't stand there and pat on the football. So to me, a pass rush to me is essential. Running backs are secondary.
And you talk about Warren Sapp. It's funny to bring that up because you got guys in the draft this year like Mixon, Foster, guys that have gotten themselves in a little bit of trouble and maybe too much trouble. And what do you think about drafting a guy when he comes up? Say Foster's on the board for the Buccaneers. They probably obviously don't need him. I'm just saying that kind of a guy. If that's the kind of guy you're looking for to put on the Buccaneers, do you look at the offseason stuff and say, you know what, I'm going to pass on him, or do you kind of brush it aside a little bit and say, okay, well, let's move forward from here?
Well, this is what's tough about being a GM, because if you look at Warren Sapp, okay?
Yeah.
You know, Warren Sapp had some issues in college.
Yep.
Now, a lot of people passed on Warren Sapp.
Yep.
They were all wrong, okay?
Exactly.
They were all wrong, because that's been documented. You should have picked them, no doubt.
Right.
So, but there's people that have had issues like Warren Sapp, and then have not made it in the league. So it's really hard to find a measurable thing. I mean, if somebody beats somebody up in a club, are you not going to pick them because they're guys that like to fight in clubs? I mean, unfortunately, some of the greatest football players ever like to fight in clubs. That's just the way it goes. So I think if I'm a GM, I look and see the situation. If a player gets popped with weed, you got to look at it a couple different ways. You got to say, hey, it's only weed. But the other way you look at it is, well, he was dumb enough to smoke it and get himself in trouble. So is he going to be able to continue to keep himself clean? And to me, the only thing that I wouldn't mess with if I was GM was anything with domestic abuse. Anything, any situation, it's not going to get better when you give the kid more money and he has more women around him. So anything to do with domestic abuse that you dealt with in college, if I was a GM, I would stay miles away from it.
And I agree with that. As in the last couple of days about Connolly from Ohio State with the allegation of the rape charge, who knows what's going to come of that? The investigation's going on. I think now he's going to drop to the second or third round, maybe even further than that with this going on. I mean, how do you, like you said, how do you take a guy when all that's going on? It's not like, you know, the Warren Sapp situation, and then you have this situation of two different entities. I totally agree with that. Have you heard anything down in Tampa about the Bucs moving out of the first round? Have you heard anything about maybe trading up to try to get a guy like McCaffrey? I know we talked about running back, but I actually love McCaffrey. I think he does a lot of different things for you in the way of returns, kicks, punts, things to that effect. Do you hear anything about that, about the Bucs moving that pick?
Well, this is another thing that I've learned throughout the years. Anything you hear is not from the Bucs.
Okay.
110%. Anything you hear is 110% not coming from one Buck place.
Okay.
If you ever heard anything that came from one Buck place for real, the person would be fired immediately.
Okay.
So
they're pretty tight-lipped over there.
There's a lot of experts out. There's a lot of experts out there that'll say, "Well, we heard from one Buck." No, you didn't. You're
Right.
making up stuff. So if you do literally hear something from one Buck place, it's smoke. It's smoke and mirrors, and they're trying to make somebody, you know, they're trying to get them off the set. So. As far as McCaffrey goes, I'm on the other end of the spectrum. I don't think he can last physically. I don't think he's fast enough for a receiver. I don't think he's durable enough to be a running back. So I wouldn't spend a high draft pick on somebody who's going to be a specialist. I don't think he could do it physically, personally.
And my last question to you, I know you probably, like you said, you haven't seen a lot of film on different guys, but you've probably heard a lot of hype for the big tight end in the league, O.J. Howard. Do you see him going very early in the draft, and do you have any idea where he's going to be going? I mean, there's been talking up here in Philadelphia that he could be going to the Eagles, which I don't see at all. But, I mean, do you like Howard? Have you seen any film on Howard at all? Or?
Well, I mean, I see what I watch on television.
Yep.
And the thing about him is, you know, the tough situation is he kind of played in a conservative type of offense. You know, so if he played it in a wide open offense, would his numbers be any different? So, you know, it's one of those things where you look at him in the combine compared to everybody else and see if he's worth a high draft pick. From what I hear, the kid's the truth.
Yeah.
And that, you know, he was kind of out of his element at Alabama. But then again, he got all the recognition because he's on television all the time. So I've heard good things about him. All I know is what I've seen on television, and he seems to have all the tools needed to play in the league.
Well, from what, like you said, from what I've seen of him on TV, he looks ready to go and looks like the real deal. I just hope he doesn't go to the Jets, because that could be a train wreck. But we will see. We will see. And my last question for you, Ian, is the Browns pick number 1. There's been a couple different moves for them. Will they screw this draft up, or will they get it right this year?
Well, if you had to bet either way, which one would you go?
Well, since the amount of quarterbacks they've taken in the last 10 years is astronomical, I'm going to say they're not going to get it right again. But eventually you have to get it right, don't you? You run out of odds here. You have to get it right.
Well, this is the thing, though. If you say eventually you have to get it right, but okay, so if you always get it wrong and you finally get it right, then the person you got it right with is playing with a bunch of people you got it wrong with, because nobody could win the game by themselves. So
yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So they don't ever get it right.
Yeah, 2 picks.
And I just think Cleveland is a place where when you walk there, when you walk in the place, I just think it's negative even before people put that uniform on. Yeah. Unfortunately.
Yeah, they kind of overthink things. I mean, they got 2 picks in the first round. We will see. It's going to be very interesting. So that's all the time we have today. I want to thank our guest Ian Beckles for coming on today. Growing out of Tampa, I watched him when I was little, watched his career unfold. For me, Ian, thank you very much for getting on. I really appreciate your insight and your talking about the Bucs with me today. I really do.
My pleasure. Let's hope the Bucs do the right thing.
Okay, go Bucs. Go Bucs. We're once a Buck, we're a Buck for life, even though I didn't play for the team. But that's it.
No doubt. No doubt.
You can catch Ian on the Ian Beckles Show on 102.5 The Bone on Sundays 11 to 1 on iHeartMedia. Check him out. It's always good listening. And you can check out the Sports Box on Twitter at Sports Box Show and on Facebook at The Sports Box. Check us out. Me and Brian, we're Laugh a Minute. We give you good insight. Check us out. We're always good for you. And remember, at the Sports Box, the only opinion that matters is still right here. Thanks for watching. See you.
This episode of the Sports Box is brought to you by Mic'd Up Entertainment and DJ Mike Velardi. For all of your event planning needs, make sure you contact Mike at 609-864-5925 and tell him that you saw him on the Sports Box.
1, 2, 3.
Don't forget to subscribe.